Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Niall Stanage. My usual debating partner, Robbie Suave, is off carousing elsewhere. So I have Stephen Kent with me here, and I'm delighted to see you, Stephen.
I hear a random federal judge just blocked Robbie from being here.
Exactly.
Just tweeted it out, injunction, Robbie's gone.
They're just moving on everything these days. So we have a lot to get to, including not an injunction against Robbie Suave, but other kinds of injunctions. Because it seems like every other day, there's a news headline about a federal judge blocking a Trump administration move. A federal judge this week blocked Trump's executive order banning transgender people from military service.
And another judge this week blocked DOJ's efforts to dismantle USAID, arguing the move was likely unconstitutional. And a separate judge earlier in March blocked the Trump administration from freezing billions in federal funds.
There's one particular case that raises the gravest questions about whether Trump will comply with court orders.
The case is about Trump invoking the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members without a hearing.
Let's take a look at a brief timeline here, which is derived from a New York Times analysis. On Friday, March 14th, President Trump signed the Alien Enemies Act. That's not actually correct. He signed an executive order invoking the Alien Enemies Act, but we'll press on. The White House did not announce that executive order until the next day. Then at 5:26 and 5:44 p.m. on Saturday, 2 deportation flights departed for El Salvador. At 6:48 p.m., Judge Boasberg verbally ordered the planes to turn around. And by the time Boasberg gave his order, one plane was apparently already flying over Mexico, while the other was over the Gulf of Mexico or America, if you prefer. The planes did not turn around. Then at 7:26, the judge's written order was posted online, but it did not have the instructions to turn the planes around. A third deportation flight left at around 7:36 p.m.
And of course, many raised questions as to whether the White House violated Trump's order. The Trump administration says they did not violate the order. They argue that they did not deport the 5 Venezuelan illegal immigrants in custody who sued the Trump administration. The DOJ also says that judge's written order did not have the instructions to turn the plane around. Here is President Trump on Fox News this weekend on whether he'd ever violate a court order.
Are there circumstances where you would defy a court order?
Well, I think that, number one, nobody's been through more courts than I have.
Going forward,
I had judges
would you
that were
defy
so
a court
corrupt.
order? Because that we all know
No,
that, and that was
I
outrageous.
never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges. We have very bad judges, and these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge.
Trump called the judge in this particular case a radical left lunatic and said that he should be impeached for impeding what voters want. This blast prompted Chief Justice John Roberts to issue a statement which read, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose."
Here's Fox's Mark Levin on the situation.
I would say that John Roberts, who I knew before he was a judge, when we both worked in the Reagan administration, it's time to grow up here. This is an issue of separation of powers, and if it's not resolved, you basically, in the form of your question, have answered it. How the hell are we going to have 680 individual, unelected federal judges, they're federal district judges, not federal national judges, all sitting there behind their desks with their 2 or 3 clerks saying, you know, I don't like this idea of Trump sending this. I don't like this idea of banning transgender. I don't like this idea. This is exactly what Locke and Montesquieu and Jefferson and Madison warned.
And the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh also chimed in.
There needs to be an all-out war at this point against activist judges. And what does that war look like? Well, it begins with this, by just ignoring them. Drawing the line in the sand and saying, okay, the judges have certain powers, certain responsibilities, a certain jurisdiction, but their powers and jurisdiction do not encompass everything.
The New York Times also recently reported that there are federal judges overseeing Trump cases who feel unsafe and have been receiving threats. While the Times noted that threats against judges aren't anything new, some federal judges are warning that the dangers in that respect appear to be rising. A lot to talk about here, Stephen. I will lead off because I think it's very dangerous what the Trump administration and its assorted allies are doing here, which is suggesting that a president has the capacity to ignore the courts. We saw that from Matt Walsh and to a degree from Mark Levin. And we see it also from other people in the administration. Tom Homan, the border czar, talking about he doesn't care what judges say, we're not stopping. Elon Musk has characterized judicial decisions that go against the president as tyranny. This, I think, is both dangerous in itself and misunderstands the nature of a pluralist democracy. And I've said this before. Last November, we did not elect an emperor or a king. We elected a president who remains subject to the judicial branch and to judicial review and to the rule of law. And Donald Trump seems to me not to accept that.
Well, I certainly think that is true. I think two things can be going on at once. I think you can say we do need to have sort of an all-out push, particularly from the conservative movement, to rebalance the role that certain judges play in the judicial branch in actually stopping executive orders, putting those through the appellate review process, taking those things to the Supreme Court, and relitigating the role of the judicial in checking the executive. But I think on the flip side, one of the things that I found to be most arson-like during the ascendancy of the left during the first Trump administration was this sort of rush to go, oh, we need to get rid of the U.S. Senate. This is a problematic institution. We need to diminish the power of the Supreme Court. We need to expand the amount of judges and then pack it. This kind of thinking basically tries to leverage as much power from you as you can out of these institutions, and then when you don't like what they're doing, you try to strip them of their power. I don't like making the Supreme Court the bad guy just because they ruled against you on something, and I don't like it when we over-dramatize the villainy of certain district judges. Challenge them, take it to court, and see if you can win.
So I agree on the court packing question. I have never been an advocate or a fan of court packing, and I think it is not only a dangerous road, but a road that leads to absurdity, because presumably what would happen would be that every time either party had the White House and a congressional majority, they would increase the number of judges on the Supreme Court bench. And, perhaps after our time, you'd end up with some 47-member Supreme Court that had been packed on 12 different occasions. So I think that is absurd. But I also find it absurd whenever we see the comments there from people like Levin and Walsh, the idea that, these activist judges. In November last year, the Republican Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, released a press release celebrating the filing of his 100th lawsuit against the Biden administration. There were apparently 133 multi-state lawsuits against the Biden administration. Now, I have no objection to the lawsuits being filed. But had President Biden just said, we'll ignore that. Yeah. We won't stop whatever the judges say.
Conservatives
people would have been rightly outraged.
To when the Biden administration didn't like the ruling around the repayment or forgiving of student loans. I mean, the Biden administration was emphatic that they were going to try and just blow past the Supreme Court on this.
I don't think, sorry to interrupt, Stephen, I don't think that's fair. They refined what they were actually doing with student loans. The original judgment about student loans was regarding the utilization of a measure that was about former members of the armed forces, heroes, I think was the phrase used. Then there were further iterations done of that, much as the first time round Trump did it with the travel ban, where he kept going back, and they did eventually get one through.
It brings to the surface every time that there is a clash between the judicial and the executive, there is this looming and very uncomfortable question in American society, which is, make me. Like, what are you going to do to stop me? And we know that the executive branch has all of the power. They have all of the use of force. And it is a very uncomfortable reality of living in this Republican form of government. Now, I do want to take us back in time a little bit to 1993. This is Clinton, don't ask, don't tell. And there's a good example of U.S. District Judge Terry Hatter. So he issued an injunction against the ruling, or not the ruling, but the passage of the rule for don't ask, don't tell from the Clinton Defense Department. And he ordered the reinstatement of Petty Officer Keith Meinhold and put a hold on don't ask, don't tell for a period of time on behalf of that one plaintiff. It ended up going through the courts, and this ended up still going through, and it became, the operating function of the military for well over a decade, 2 decades at least. I think what critics here of what these judges are doing are saying that there needs to be plaintiffs involved in these actions, that when district judges hop in and they just, basically just tweet out, "I don't like what you've done, stop, stop, stop." It works better within the system when they actually are representing a client, that there is a person attached to this case. Otherwise, you do just have judges in random corners, such as this one random district judge who blocked the Obama administration from putting a halt on deportations during his tenure. That you actually don't really have a real rule of law and process here. You just have obstructionism. And that does need to be changed. I think that the Supreme Court can help the entire country figure this out. And that's what the Trump administration is trying to trigger here.
I think it is fair to say that the legal process works better if people have standing to sue, have the capacity to show injury. I mean, there's a whole case about Mahmoud Khalil, which we discussed before, where he obviously can show direct injury. But while I agree on that point, I think it is extraordinarily generous to the Trump administration, given how sweeping its statements have been, to suggest that they're doing it in the service of trying to slightly tweak the judicial process so that we have more plaintiffs showing direct injury.
Yeah, the Trump administration, and really I think this goes back to Project 2025, is most of what has happened in this first month and a half of the administration, it's in the document. You can actually find where they sort of wrote out and laid the groundwork for everything we're seeing here, and this is meant to trigger this conflict. So this is them walking right onto the landmines and saying, we want to relitigate the authority of certain courts in America and their relationship to the executive.
I think we will return to this topic again. I'm sure there's a lot to discuss. And up next, we stick with President Trump, who has fired 2 Democrats from the FTC. Stick with us.